Welcome to another episode of the Jobology podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, and today my guest is the creative executive for a talent led production company. He's going to talk to us about what denotes a bad script from a good script, and he's going to tell us why there's 10 Fast and the Furious movies. So without further ado, Emilio. First, I would just like to say thank you for being with me today, Emilio.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, I'm really excited to learn more about exactly what you're doing because I think your job, we'll get into exactly what that is here in a minute, but I think your job is one of the jobs where if you tell somebody what it is, they might not know exactly what that means right off the bat. So I think it'll be something very interesting for our viewer to learn, like, oh, that's what that job is. So, first question we always like to ask to kind of set a baseline here is how would you describe what you do versus like what's your official title on your business card?
Yeah, so I'm a creative executive, and I think anything with the creative title is just this wide net of possibilities of what you do,
Yeah.
ranging from social media to strategy planning to whatever. And so I think it's sort of I like it because it's broad, and so I get to explain it and sort of sell myself in that way. But a creative executive basically in the film business. So I worked in TV and film is basically I like to call it a glorified project manager in the sense
Okay.
of um, we're I aid the company in order to package things and we can get into what development really means for film and television a little bit later. But as far as what the job is, I think it sounds kind of like, oh, you're one of the executives in the ether above the crew or
Right.
what you see on set and
You're in your ivory tower that we don't know what the
yeah
heck's going on up there. Uh-huh.
it's the kind of the background work and the conversations, but as a creative executive you're not really quite in the executive producer role where you're making
Okay.
those huge choices. You're really facilitating and taking projects where they from one place to where they need to be. And so I like the idea that it's sort of a glorified project manager because at the end of the day, it's about how do you get a project from this place to this place,
Right.
essentially making it sellable. So
Okay.
a lot of times, whether it's a piece of intellectual property, what we call IP,
Mm-hmm.
or a script, or even just a director or writer, if they have an idea, how can we package that idea in or that script or that IP to a place where now we can go outside of our own ecosystem in our company to make it sellable, to make it alluring for anybody that can actually finance it, right?
Okay. And then what kind of company would you be working for exactly?
So I work for a talent-led production company.
Okay.
Basically, what that differs from a normal studio to more of a boutique production company is, Plan B, for example, is led by Brad Pitt. And so that would be a talent-led company.
Okay.
So a lot
Okay.
of what Plan B does is attuned to what Brad Pitt does, but they've been able to sort of branch out of that. And so
Gotcha.
I work for an actor,
Hmm.
and it's very much different than just like a studio system where
Gotcha.
we're in, where you're basically trying to get talent from whatever resources the company has, whatever people they've worked with before to package either TV or film and get it to a selling point. For us, it's a
Okay.
little bit easier on the talent side because an actor has worked with directors, has worked with fellow actors, and so we can package it on that end. But what we don't have is that financial backing that a studio might have, like a Universal or an MGM or or a Netflix or Prime. So we have to partner with those companies to bring in that talent and then sell a product.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Like it seems like that could be really beneficial on the side of like working for talent because like you're the talent's the one doing the work. Like they're not just backing the money, like they're the one doing the work, so they know how it should kind of go or what the like what will work, what won't work, what will play, what won't play.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Okay.
think there's a couple of pros and cons. I think a
Sure.
con is, we're so boutique to the point where, we don't have those big bucks to have development money. So we can't just be paying writer after writer after writer to get something to the right place, or put on a full 10 million to 20 million to 30 million
Yeah.
production,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Because what we bring to the table is the talent, is this
Gotcha.
sort of, we have a big name attached to a project, whether it is to, act in or be a part of, or just to executive produce or to have that name attached.
Okay, that makes sense. It kind of makes it seem like your decisions then are that much more important. Where it's like we don't have the wiggle room to like really make mistakes here. Like if we make a decision, we got to go for it. Like
Yeah, yeah.
okay,
I think it's
that's cool.
definitely a sort of trial and error thing where
Sure.
what we bring to the and I think what's so appealing to me personally about what I do and specifically the company that I work for is there is more of a creative stake than anything else. Because we can't bring in the money, because we can't bring in sort of this big scale, what we have to bring in is either talent or pure development savviness, right? So us as a team knowing behind this name, there's a creative team that can make a story go from an okay place to a really great place and then attach talent. But we don't have the money. And so there is a higher stake of like the value we bring is purely creative rather than financial or if that makes sense or like scale
Yeah, no, for
wise.
sure. So it makes I mean, again, that seems like that would make your job that much more important where it's like, man, I better be making my right calls here and there because this is what
Right.
I got to offer. Okay. Why? Like why get into this? Is it something you've always wanted to do? Is it something you kind of fell into? Like what kind of led to you landing this role?
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to talk too much about it because my journey is sort
Hey,
of very specific. But I grew up in Guatemala, in a
oh
third
wow,
world
okay.
country where you I didn't have access to any sort of like the arts.
Hmm.
Um, I think the government and just the structure that we have, you have the 1% and then you have everybody else, and it's very
Sure.
much we work to survive mentality. And so the arts haven't really had, I think there's a couple of, 1700s poets that really made the cut as far as
Yeah.
Guatemala goes, but
Yeah.
as far as filmmakers or musicians or modern day actors, like there's not much. And so for me, I grew up loving movies and loving the escapism of it. I wasn't an athlete, I wasn't a mathematician, and so I kind of fit into this artistic, very small
Like
sector of what
niche.
I wanted to do.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so I
Okay.
didn't really see me going anywhere with that, but I knew I loved movies. So I decided to go to film school here in LA. And in film school, it was in my mentality, I've only heard of two positions, which is director and producer.
Right. That's
And
as far as and that an actor. Like that's about
an
as much as
actor,
I know.
right?
Like, yeah,
And
that's about as much as I know. All right.
and so that's I remember as a kid watching like a VHS, and at the end of the VHS was like the special features, and the only people talking were either the director or the producer. And so I was like, okay, so I can either go either way. Director seems more creative and story led, so I'll kind of do that. And then the Pandora's box sort of opens to there's the art department, and then there's the lighting department and cinematography. You need to understand all these like technical things about a camera. And then there's the legal department, and their
Yeah.
producing has so many facets of on-set producing, or what we call line producing, which is being on set and managing all the logistics. And then there's creative producing, which is more story doctoring and sort of
Wow.
shaping the story. And then there's executive producer, which basically is either the money, it's the money in film, but it's the creative voice in television. I'm still figuring out what that
Okay.
really means.
Yeah.
It's constantly changing. And so, that kind of opened up to me and I was like, wow, there's a lot more that I can do. I started writing and directing and that was good. I think it definitely satisfied my, I think, creative itch to tell stories, which
Sure.
is essentially what I think anybody that's in the arts, um, and even more broad, like anybody that has a creative itch, that's what it kind of boils down to is telling
Yeah.
a story.
Even I mean, even a painter, you have a pay like
Yeah,
they're still trying to tell a story in their one painting. Yeah, or get an idea across something like that.
yeah. I mean, I'm a
Okay.
huge like food fan, and so
Oh.
and even seeing things like Chef's Table on
Hmm.
Netflix, where each chef has a story to tell with their food. So
Yeah.
I think I have
It's
a
a good
pretty
point.
holistic view of like what that
Hmm.
means, and so for me, it was everybody's trying to write and direct.
Sure.
but what's something else that could still scratch that itch that is more suited to my personality type? And I think for me, I found producing to be that, in the sense of I really enjoy fostering an environment where each individual can be their best self and feel validated in that.
That's
And so
awesome.
for me, when I started producing in college, these small short films, it was like, okay, the director has a vision. They don't know how to get it to practical terms. So I can be the middleman in that. But then the art director has a vision for it. How can I enable that person to do what they need to do and have those conversations?
Like cohesiveness.
Yeah, and sort of be the glue between all these creative forces and ideas and minds to make something beautiful. Because I think we've misrepresented film in it being just about the director, or just about the actors, or just about the writer, when really you have so many people that are writing the story along the way. The editor has a big say, the composer has a big say, the art director has a big say, and everybody in between, right? Um,
Is there a genre that you like find yourself turning to more than any other genre? Like, I mean, for me personally, I'm a big comedy person, so if there's a new comedy movie out, I'm usually going to
right.
watch that as opposed to like a drama or horror. Not really into horror that much, so
Yeah.
try and stay away from that. Is there something that really like gets you going?
I mean, I love elevated sci-fi where it's not just about building a world, but it's there's a philosophy behind it. I think Denis Villeneuve's like Arrival, for example, like
Okay,
Arrival for me, or Ex Machina that was directed by Alex Garland. I think those two films really were a shifting point for me, because
okay,
it wasn't just about, oh, it's an alien movie, but it's about choice, and it's about family, and it's about um, what if you could know the future, but you still have to make tough choices regardless of the consequences. I think Arrival explores that. I think Ex
interesting.
Machina explores the idea of artificial intelligence, and can we, us as humans, can we synthesize emotion to the point where we're not really feeling it, and what does that really mean? So it
Huh,
sort of has a philosophical backbone, but it's presented in something that only movies can do, which is these sci-fi worlds that don't exist, right?
nice.
And
Yeah,
so I think that to me is the best of both worlds. It's the best of imagination and world building and creativity, and using all the tools of filmmaking that you can, but also having um, a narrative and having importance in what you're saying, not just for the sake of saying it, right?
a meaning behind it, not just like, hey, look at these cool explosions, look at this cool CGI stuff I can do, look at all the, new toys I have, but like there's actually
Exactly.
a meaning behind it, a philosophy behind it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think that to
Cool.
me is the best of both worlds, and so, and sci-fi is such a good vessel for that, because you can really go so many places with,
Yeah.
whether that's an alternate future, whether that's, I love the idea of retrofuturism, of like, what if had things had changed, what if a space race had gone on, what would that have
Right.
meant for like America, and I don't know, I'm
That's
very
cool.
fascinated by that whole thing. And so development,
Yeah.
I kind of found, I started through internships as a reader, which basically means you just read scripts and you kind of score the scripts for the higher ups, for them to know if it's worth them even taking a look,
Nice.
which I find really sort of crazy that it's up to these like college interns to be
Yeah,
the
that's what I was
first
gonna say.
wall.
Uh-huh. Like they're like, well, we trust you. Hopefully you got it.
Yeah, yeah, it's like an internship, and so you're working for free, and you just maybe had a couple conversations with the assistant of the executive,
Hmm.
and then you're tasked with being those first eyes, with stuff, which I just found super interesting. And I think development was the sweet middle for me. I've been a non-set producer, I've been a line producer where you're running all the logistics. My brain isn't necessarily wired for that. I get really
Yeah.
stressed out. I'm also a people pleaser. And so line producers tend to be the no people. Like, we don't have budget for that. No, you can't do that.
Hmm. Like I don't want to tell people no. I just want to do what I can. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want, do it.
Yeah. Okay. And is this something you have to go to like college for? Is this like the path? It's a path like, hey, I go to school for this, and then out of school I land a job, or is this a path where you go, hey, I gotta self promote myself, and I just, knew somebody that got me into this role? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's like because it is sort of more in the executive realm, you definitely start at the bottom of the totem pole. So
Sure.
I started as an assistant where you're basically, yeah, you're reading scripts and stuff, but most of the time you're scheduling meetings, you're running for office supplies,
Yeah.
you're an assistant. You're an office assistant for a
Hmm.
while. And through that, I think I was sort of blessed enough to be in a company that was so small where you didn't
Hmm.
get lost in the numbers. I think if you work in a talent agency is another route to development or route to producing where you start in the mailroom and then a couple, X months or years later you get a desk and you're an assistant to an agent and you're
Yeah.
in the weeds of these negotiations and packaging and
Yeah.
all that crazy side of this business, and eventually maybe you get to be an agent, and once you get to be an agent you have like that one breakout writer, that one breakout director that really puts you on the map as an agent, and you get to now be a producer and be a developer. For me it was sort of a different route where I started interning in development companies that were doing that sort of that route. And then I kind of fell into this talent-led company where, we're less than 10 employees. We
Wow.
really are prone to the actors of a project. And so that was a little bit different than
Yeah.
sort of a traditional development route.
Do you have any interest in acting yourself?
Not really.
Okay.
I think acting is you have to have a certain gift and a
Sure.
certain mentality that I think for me, even writing is like vulnerable. And I
Hmm.
struggle with that because I
Yeah.
think I enjoy writing and I have written and I want to write more, but even that is sort of like too vulnerable for me. That's why I
Sure.
like development because
Yeah, you put it out
it,
there and they're like, nah, this isn't good. And you're like, oh my
yeah.
God, crush me, kills me. Okay.
It's really tolling, and
Yeah,
acting is even a higher degree of that. It's not only
sure.
your your creative take. It's your face, it's your body,
Yeah.
it's your voice, it's your image.
Yeah. We don't like the way you look. It's like, ooh, ouch. Okay. Dang. Ooh.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It's pretty jarring. And so yeah,
Interesting.
development was just that sweet middle where it felt safe to an extent, but it's still creative enough where I'm not dealing
Right.
with all the logistics of set, but I'm still dealing with the creative side of a project and how to get a project to the best self it can be.
Right. And like make decisions that, hey, this can go right or can go wrong, but it's not necessarily a reflection of like, again, like your personal look or your heart
Right.
or your whatever. It's more like, let's try it this way this time. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Something that I find fascinating with almost every job I talk to, because I literally don't know usually at all what people do on an average day. If if you were like, hey, what do I do? I'd be like, meetings, emails, I'm guessing, but I have no idea. So is there like, what would an average day kind of look like for you? What time do you have to start? Do you have to go into an office? Can you work from home? What time do you
Yeah.
finish? Is there good work-life balance? What does an average day look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think pre-pandemic, definitely it's an office 9 to 5 job,
Okay.
which to me, I really like versus a freelance job in film, which has its own pros and cons as far as, you have your own schedule and you can choose what project to do and it's sort of flexible. I
Hmm.
think anything on the executive side of film and television is very much 9 to 5, if not even more hours, where you're
Yeah.
going into an office. As an assistant, it was a lot of scheduling calls, what we call rolling calls. So the executive needs to talk to us X number of people, um, and so you're just rolling those calls, call after call. You're listening in, taking notes. As what I
Gotcha.
do now as a creative executive, you're sort of aiding different projects, and so it's a lot of following up, like what stage are we in with this? If you're dealing with a writer, it's like, hey, how's this looking? And then that writer will send you a script. That's like either a new submission or agents will submit stuff. And so it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of
Okay.
reading scripts. It's a lot of taking notes on those scripts. It's a lot of meetings that are, well, development meetings. So it's, hey, I liked this version of the script. Here's my few notes. What do you think of that? And then, and that's really the heart of development is sort of what it sounds like, is developing a script to the point, to the best point it can get before we go out to buyers.
Almost like, I mean, if I were to compare it to like maybe something that more people were familiar with, like it's like practice almost, kind of like, hey, let's
Yeah.
practice this script as many times as we can. Let's work out all the kinks, let's work out all the issues, and then we can go to production or to.
Yeah, that's why I like the idea that it's a glorified project manager, because with a
Hmm.
project, you need to go through several drafts and several
Yeah,
iterations and workshop it and nitpick it to for it to get to the best place possible, right?
sure.
And that can that most of the time that's a script, but because we're also like going out to sellers, a lot of times it's a pitch. So we have pitch
Mm,
decks and pitch bibles that explain the world and the characters and the ideas that a creator has. And so we're in the weeds of like figuring those things out at the
right.
same time looking for more content. So it's a lot of like
Hmm.
general meetings with writers or directors or producers that have they're looking for partners to for certain projects. And so we kind of fit, whether it's their mission or their view of things. And so we'll talk to them about that.
Okay. Interesting. And then is this something where once the day is over, you're done and you can go home and put the phone away and relax and have your own time? Or is this something where it's like, kind of gotta be always around just in case there's an issue?
Yeah, I think it depends on the company. It depends on your personality. I think for me,
Sure.
I'm sort of like I like separating church and state in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, after a certain time, I'm like, I'm going to turn my phone off. I'm going to turn my email off because
Yeah.
it's
I'll get
important to
to it
me
in
to
the
have that
morning.
separation. Yeah, I'll get to it in the morning. And I think that's another nice thing about development is like it's a slower pace than a set. On a set,
Sure.
you're there for 30 plus days. You have to show up for, 10 to 12-hour days for those amount of days to get things done. And you're really
Yeah.
never off because
Yeah.
you just have to make sure the next day is ready and all that. With everything that's happening kind of behind the scenes and the executive side, things they're fast paced, but they're moving a little bit slower. They're moving a
Right.
little bit slower with, and especially the last couple of years due to the pandemic and, everything that's happening currently in the world. I think there's even been a little bit more of a slowdown. And occasionally you have like, we're about to have the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, is about to have a strike
Oh
to,
wow.
due to some policies. And so that really halts everything in a way,
Sure.
because if you're part of the WGA, then if they strike, then you can't really be active in a sense.
Is a strike good, bad, or neutral for you at your position?
I think there's two ways. At my position, it's bad because we need projects to keep moving,
Sure.
and for things to keep developing and for, that movement. Personally, I think that, I think it's good. I think writers especially tend to be a little bit, undermined and sort of brushed to the side. Thanks for the script. We'll take it from here, whatever. And
Yeah.
so I think any sort of reform when it comes to writers' rights, even directors' rights,
Yeah.
for me personally, I think values wise, it's good.
Sure.
But as far as a company, it does slow things down a little bit. But back to your original question, for me,
Hmm.
it's right now, for example, like my bosses are on set for a while, and so I have the ability to work from home, which allows me to
Cool.
set my own schedule, but it's not something where I feel like I have to constantly be on, which I think
That's
is
good.
good because it allows space for, inspiration for
Yeah.
watching movies and finding other things that I really enjoy.
It's got to be fun to be like, oh, so I'm working by watching these movies, just so you know. I'm not just watching movies for fun here. I'm kind of like,
Yeah, yeah,
I am working hard watching my favorite films. Okay, that's a good perk of the job that, something we can get to right now actually is perks and benefits. So, is your job salary, hourly? Do you have like medical, dental, all that kind of benefits?
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's salary. It is salary. It is. I do have like benefits as
Sure.
dental and medical insurance, which I think is a
Nice.
nice part. I think
Definitely.
post college, it was a jarring thought to sort of be freelancing and I have to fend on my own, especially as a producer. You kind of have to find financing, and then it's a lot like starting a company where you have to find investors for
Yeah.
certain projects, and then those investors have to make their money back. It just that didn't really seem for me to that
Mm,
capacity. I think having a salary job where, yeah, things are a little bit slower and happening at a slower pace, but I'm still creatively satisfied in having these conversations and reading
right.
these scripts and finding the things that I really connect with. Um, but that's kind of a big perk is
Yeah.
I have that financial stability of being salary. Yeah.
Right. Is there something I like to discuss? And I mean, this is there may not be any, or there may be a lot. Is so perks and benefits. We all know, like, kind of, we just talked about the traditional benefits, but is there like any hidden perks that maybe like the outside person doesn't see? Where you go, oh man, like getting to watch a movie on, a random day just because I gotta, study it or try and see like what the writer did, what the director did, what choices they made. That seems like that could be a perk to me. But is there something
Yeah.
else where you can might think of that's like, oh, that's something that most jobs don't have that I get to have?
Yeah. I mean, I think I get to have a job where I get to be creative. I
That's
get
cool.
to think about things from a story perspective.
Hmm.
I get to think about characters and their motivations and the stakes of a story.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's
and
cool.
that and that to me is huge because I think that
Hmm.
that's always, going back to that first year college kid of like, I just kind of want to be involved somehow. I just want to tell
Yeah.
stories and I don't know what that looks like. A lot of people get to graduate and it's like, in order for you to do that, you need to direct your own thing. And in order for you
Hmm.
to direct your own thing, you need to spend 15 years, you know, doing something else or waiting for that big break.
Yeah.
Um, and although I don't get to tell necessarily my own stories that I've written or whatever, I still get to I've gotten good at reading scripts and knowing what works and what doesn't.
Right.
And that
You get
just
to like
comes
put your
from,
spice on it. Like
yeah,
it might not be
and
your exact story, but you get to put your little, seasoning
yeah,
on it.
yeah. And I'm so people oriented that whenever I meet writers, that's just such an invigorating conversation
Mm,
because a writer has a POV and they have something they want to say. And I get to be receptive to that and
yeah.
work with them on that. And so to me, creatively, I feel constantly satisfied and just like even if it's, a
That's awesome.
script, like I'm still hearing a voice, I'm still seeing something
Sure.
that is outside of myself. And I really do enjoy that. And with that, it is watching other people's movies. And it's like, oh, this director sent their Sundance film that premiered in the Sundance Film Festival, and we're going to talk with them next week. And so I get to watch the film, and if I really connect with it, it's kind of like,
Hmm.
I get to fan out in a way
Yeah, that's cool. That's pretty
with that
cool.
director
Hmm.
because I'm like, hey, I really enjoyed your film, and here's why. Tell me a little bit about this. You get your own personal Q&A, and
Yeah.
on top of that, you possibly get to work with a person. So
Yeah.
those are the moments that for me, I really get, yeah, I really do feel blessed and satisfied because it's not super often, but there is the occasional person that comes across that I get to watch something, I love it, and then I
Sure.
get to talk to that person about it.
Sure. For your position now, I mean, this probably depends on, what kind of company you're working for, how big the scale is. But is there a range of pay that you could provide us to where we would have an idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely depends on the company, on the
Sure.
extent. I think that there is levels of creative executives in the sense of like I would consider myself probably a junior creative executive,
Okay.
considering that I've only been on the job for a little while.
Mhm.
And then there's sort of senior creative executives that are
Gotcha.
borderline just producers, where they're getting producer credits, they're getting associate producer credits. Um, I think there's two aspects to it. There's, if you work for a company, you have a salary job, I think can range from 50 to even 100 to even
Okay.
120. So I
Nice.
think there's a big range just on how many contacts you're bringing in, how much you're
Right.
producing. And additionally, there are producer fees that projects often have. And
Okay.
so, in a world where, and this hasn't happened for me yet necessarily, in a world where I bring on a project and it's really me doing the heavy lift on behalf of the company, but really I'm doing it, then
Mhm.
I think there are added fees from
Like
that credit,
commissions almost,
like commissions. Yeah.
okay. Cool. That's interesting. And then for your job specifically, do you have like a team behind, like under you, above you? What kind of, what's your like job hierarchy look like?
Yeah. So there's the office assistants
Okay.
um that are sort of at the bottom. Well, the interns really are at the bottom, which are often
Sure.
readers that just kind of read for us and kind of what I was describing earlier,
Yeah. Grade the
uh,
scripts.
grade these scripts. Then there's the assistants. Um, I'm a part of a sort of a 7-person team. And
Oh, cool.
so we have 2 assistants, then it's me and another creative executive. And then we have kind of 3 bosses. Two of
Yeah.
them are the CEOs, and they're at the top. And then we have sort of a consultant producer
Okay.
that is more of a veteran producer who really works with us at the same level. Like
Hmm.
it's like I'm not working for her necessarily,
Okay.
but because she has more experience, it's just sort of like learning and mentorship.
Yeah.
I think other companies have more of a hierarchy where it's, oh, a couple more degrees and levels, but
Sure.
because we're sort of a boutique company, it's a
It's more like,
simpler ladder.
yeah, some more like a diagonal than opposed to a vertical. Like I
Yeah,
have this person. It's more like, yeah, we're like, she's there, but she's not really above me, but
right.
kind of off to, gotcha. Okay. That's cool. If you were to have somebody start, either on the team with you or somebody else that a friend of yours that's starting at a new company but same kind of position, do you have any advice for a new employee?
Yeah, I think the film industry, the film and television industry is the kind of industry that you get out of it what you put in. You know,
Okay.
I think there is sort of a unsaid expectation to go up and beyond the call of duty in when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to this. If you want to just clock in and clock out, schedule, take notes, and that's it, you can. I don't, but you'd be crazy to want to be in this industry and not want to be,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the kind of thing where you really have to find a true love for story and for filmmaking and for this world where it's just you just want to be close to it and you have that hunger.
Mm-hmm.
um so I think it's a bad initiative, but I think it's also about, I think my big thing has been staying inspired. I think
Gotcha.
that a lot of people become very cynical about the industry, rightly so. Like it's tough and everything,
Yeah.
but I think I have to consistently get inspired, whether it is through films I love, whether it is discovering films that I love, or writers or directors or whatever, to constantly feel inspired. That fuels my work. I
Yeah.
think that is because sometimes you don't get validation from
No, for
your
sure.
higher ups. Sometimes it does feel like you're being pushed to the side. Sometimes it does feel like you don't really have a say. But those
Yeah.
are the moments that you need to remind yourself that it's not really about you, but it's about telling stories and finding that inspiration. And so it's sort of philosophical. It's not very practical advice, but
No, but
but I
I mean,
think finding
focus
that
on the bigger
inspiration,
picture.
yeah,
Like focus on the bigger picture. Yeah, your one little bit might get run over or you might get, propped up, but it's not really about that. It's about the bigger kind of idea. I think that's
yeah,
solid advice for people. Yeah.
yeah. And I think the other thing is, I think we live in sort of a hustle culture where it's like we want to see results,
Hmm.
very early in and invest and, whatever. But I think that this industry and this business is very much a lifelong commitment. It's a
Sure.
lifelong relationship where you might not see results for a while, where you feel like validated or you have this credit or whatever.
Yeah.
So it is a long game. And so just to mentally sort of prepare for that.
Yeah. Something I always like to tell people when, whatever it might be is like, it's okay to feel discouraged, but it's not okay to live in discouragement. Like you can
Mm,
feel it for a minute and then you gotta figure out a way to get out of it
absolutely.
and move on to the
Yeah.
next thing. Like that seems like that could apply of like, hey, you might get discouraged from, job one, but then job two might be different. Job three might, it might be different. Project one, project two, project three might be different. So, feel discouraged. Okay, that sucked. But then move on. Next thing. Like, what are we
Right.
doing? Okay. Is there anything you would change along your path? So not
Mm.
necessarily, the general creative executive, but you personally, is there something along your path that you're like, ah, man, wish I would have done X or wish I wouldn't have done X or whatever it might be?
I think I would have. liked to, I think college specifically was sort of like we were just so excited to make stuff that the
Sure.
classes I didn't really like get everything out of the classes that I wish I could have. So
Hmm.
that I think that's one aspect.
Yeah.
I think I would have liked to direct a little bit more, just to. I think I was so stressed out about having stability that I
Gotcha.
didn't like flex a little bit more of the muscles of directing or writing and things like that. But the beautiful thing
Hmm.
is I don't think it's ever too late to do that. And if
Yeah. Right.
anything, like it's different when I was 21, 22 than today, and so I have more life to kind of pour into something like writing. So, I haven't written it out completely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's
Yeah.
always another like the next project. So you go,
Yeah.
hey, on this one, I wish I would have done that. Okay, well, I'll take that into the next project and see, does
Yeah.
this work like that? And then maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And you go, oh, okay, got to adjust on the next one until you find like, oh, this is how it should go every single time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I have a couple questions that I think are job related. We'll see. I mean, one of them you kind of mentioned a little bit already, so I'm like, okay, maybe that will play. I think I did my job here and came up with a good question, but we'll see. Um, what denotes a good pitch from a bad pitch?
It's a great question. I think you can always tell when someone's prepared or not. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of, that's kind of obvious, but there really is something to being prepared, to knowing your story so well, to not even knowing it, but being confident in it,
Okay.
being confident in what you're putting out there, and sort of being prepared to answer any questions that people might have about your world, your characters, your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also I think showing malleability as far as like being open enough to receiving feedback, to receiving critique.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think more on the practical end, I'm a big fan of sort of like census stimulus, in the sense of like if you're able to put in like a fake trailer or some
Okay.
music or something that moves me beyond just knowledge, but it's like sensatory as far as like my emotional response to something.
Sure.
Um, like I want to feel. I think I don't know if you know the movie Looper.
Yeah, actually, I do.
Um,
I haven't seen a lot of movies, but I have seen that movie.
yeah. So
It's like the
Looper,
time travel. He keeps like ending up in
time
the.
travel.
Gotcha.
It's Ryan Johnson who did
Mhm.
some Star Wars. He did like the Glass
Mhm.
Onion and Knives Out. Um, so Looper was bought based off of a storyboard, like minute and a half cliptomatic, which is
Mhm.
basically just like a very raw animated version of the trailer,
Okay.
um, that basically sells you the world, the concept, the characters in a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And it was just this like very roughly drawn thing, and it's like immediately it's a no-brainer. Like I don't need to know more because it's just like I get it. This is the world. This is the vibe, the tone, the characters. And
Yeah.
so for me, if you're able to translate that into something, whether it is by comparing it to something else or by providing big images that give me that, that's
Hmm.
great. I think too
Okay.
much text or too much, like I think as a writer, you're so close to the material and you want to express everything. And it's like I only have, you have 10 minutes of my time
Yeah.
before I forget half the things that you're going to talk about. So
Yeah.
how can you
Totally.
sell me the project without overloading information?
Gotcha. Okay. And then my second question that I have kind of in the job realm here is why does it seem like only sequels and remakes are getting made and nothing original?
Yeah, because I think we're getting to a place where people, it's scarier to take bigger risks.
Okay.
And sequels and remakes, they're safe. We know as for a fact that there's an audience there.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that someone, why are there 10? I love this example. Being Latino myself, why are there 10 Fast and Furious movies?
Right.
As
But
as far like arguably like cheesy, arguably like super far out, but we're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars being poured into these movies. Why get to 10? right?
Yeah.
And the answer is because you have a Latino community that don't see themselves represented on the screen much. You have, everybody connects to themes of family and action, and people
Yeah.
generally like cars. And
Yeah.
so you can bet that even at 10 movies in, people are still going to show up to the theater to watch
Yep. I'll
it.
still tune in. I don't know
Yeah.
what, again, I don't know what it is about it, but I'm like, I mean, I feel like we've covered everything in the Fast and the Furious, but hey,
Yeah.
there's always
Yeah.
something that they can come up with.
And really, the era of the movie star, I think, is coming to an end, and it's really about the
Hmm.
franchise. And I think that that's why really Marvel has done what it's done, because it's no
Mm,
longer, Robert Downey Jr. wasn't really Robert Downey Jr. until he was Iron Man. Like he
yeah.
did a comeback in such a way where now you can't separate those two. Same
Right.
for, the all the original Avengers. Like I think they were known but not really who they are today as far as
Sure.
actors because of that. And
I mean,
so
you
I
see like
think,
Chris Hemsworth and people go, "Oh, that's Thor," as opposed to that's
yeah,
Chris. Like
exactly.
they can't even separate the two. Okay.
Yeah, it's odd seeing him in something else, or it's a little
Right.
bit like, okay, it has Thor in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I got to
so
get
I
over
think,
that of like this isn't Thor, this is, something else. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and at the same time you are seeing the streamers like Apple, like
Mm-hmm.
some Netflix shows where there really are unique ideas, and you are seeing something really original, but where, and it's in the television space. And I
Okay.
think that that's why we're in the golden age of television. I think
Mm,
films, it's really hard to bet on an original idea unless it's a renowned director, unless you're A24, unless you're Neon doing these sort of indie movies that cinephiles love and
yeah.
actually a broader audience now. But as far as like original big blockbusters, like we're not seeing Jaws anymore. We're not seeing these sort of
Yeah.
original things because it's hard. It's a harder sell. It's a higher
Yeah.
risk. And so
Right.
TV, what TV provides is a platform through the streaming to provide those original ideas. So that's why we're seeing a lot more original TV than film.
Yeah. Makes sense of like if you go to a producer and you're like, hey, I have this new idea, I have no idea if it's going to work or not, and it's going to cost 10 to 20 million. Or you go, hey, I'm going to do the 10th version of this thing. It's going to cost 10 to 20 million, but I know it works. Like, let's just do the one that we know
Right.
works. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, that's about all I have for you on that end. Something I always like to ask my guest is there something that you were hoping I would ask or thought I would ask that I didn't?
I don't think so. I think that kind of sums
Nice.
up what I do and stuff like that.
Nice.
So
All right. Did
yeah.
my job right.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
then the last little bit of the podcast here, I always like to leave for the guest to either promote themselves, a small business, a charity, something they want to bring attention to, or if you just want to chat about whatever, here's your time.
Yeah. There's nothing like a huge project that I'm working on right now independently or even in the company where I'm like, this is the big thing I'm super pumped for.
Yeah.
But I have found I think now that the theaters are open, um a lot more open, and I've been going to the American Cinematheque here in LA. Yeah, go watch movies. I think I'm a huge proponent for theaters. I get that we have
Mhm.
our streaming services, but I think there's something to the movie going experience that is really, really special. And I think that it's dying off a little bit, but I'm a huge proponent to going and seeing movies and enjoying them in an audience. There's so much energy that you get from an audience watching something. And so, yeah, go watch movies in the theaters, I would say.
Yeah, I like that because I too am somebody that for certain movies I have to see it in the theater. Like if a new Marvel movie comes out, it's just not going to be the same on
Yeah,
my TV screen than it is on the big screen with a bucket of popcorn on my lap, and like it's just a different total experience, and it
yeah,
can even impact the way you view the movie and your final thoughts on the movie, I think. So
absolutely.
that's awesome. It's a good something good to leave the viewer with of like, hey, go support. I know it might be a little more expensive than you want to spend right now, especially. And what about this AMC thing of charging for different seats?
That's wild to me. I
Okay.
mean, mean, I could get into that whole thing about theaters, but I would say support theaters, especially your local theaters. If there's a
That's a good
theater
point.
that's kind of more boutique, it's got like 6 screens.
Mm-hmm.
Go support it. Those are dying off, but they're so charming. They're so
Yeah,
passionate. A lot of times showing indie films, a lot of times showing old films. It's worth it. It's
cool.
worth it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you very much. I mean, that was a great information for a lot of people, and thank you for taking your time to do this for me. I
Yeah,
really
thank
appreciate
you. I
it.
appreciate it. Yeah, cheers.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the Jobology podcast, and thank you, Emilio, for your time today. Before I let you guys go, a couple quick reminders. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow at Jobology Podcast on all major social media platforms, and check us out on TikTok. Like we say to end every episode, make good choices.